One of the most important hooks to learn in React is useState. And within the next 7 minutes, I'm going to walk you through all of the things that you need to know to understand how this hook works. When building an application, you often need to dynamically store and update data that is displaying on your page. For example, in our application here, we have a product name, which in this case is Apple. And this product name is explicitly written within the code. In most cases, this isn't really useful, and we need to dynamically update this data. Now, one way we could store this data is by using a traditional variable. We can declare that variable as we usually would within our application, and we could use that data within the return of our function by replacing our hard-coded text with the name of the variable, and we put that variable within curly brackets. As you can see, our application is now pulling that variable to display on the page. We can do the exact same thing with our number here, which is the quantity of our product. If we declare a variable at the top, let's call it quantity, and we can make that equal to a default value of 0. We can then use the name of that variable, replace the 0, and put it within curly brackets. Again, this is now being pulled and displayed on the page. So, within our application, you can see we have a decrease and an increase button. What if we wanted to update the number that's being displayed on the page with these buttons? Well, we'd need to have a function, right? We'll declare that function by writing function handle decrease, and we'll have this function decrease the quantity by 1. After we've written our function, we can then use that within our buttons. We can declare an onClick function, which is then going to call the function which we just made. We have our onClick, and you'd think this function would work. If we refresh our page and then try to press the decrease button, you'll see that nothing's actually changing here. It's not decreasing the number. But if we log our quantity, you can see that it is actually updating. So let's refresh the page and press the button again. In the console, you can see that it now is -1. So the function itself is working, but it's not updating on the page. And that's because when you're building a React application, you need to use hooks to update data. If we use the useState hook, every time this variable updates, the page is going to refresh that part, and it's going to display the new value which was just declared. If we go over to our application, we can declare this variable in another way. And the syntax for declaring a state variable is actually quite simple. At the basic level, this is how we use useState to declare a state variable. But you can see that our application's not working. That's because we need to import it into our file in order to use that useState hook. We can pull out that useState function from the React library. As you can see, the error now goes away. If I refresh the page, we have nothing in our console. So as it stands, this is not very useful. The useState hook returns 2 values. The first value, we'll call it quantity, is going to be how we call that value within our application. The next value that we have here is what is known as a setter function. As it stands, we've declared our state variable. We have the way that we call that variable and the way that we set it. And we can also, within the useState, declare a default value for this state variable. So in our case, we're going to have it default to 0. Now you can see when I made that update, it updated within the application as well. If I just refresh here, if I delete the 0, you'll see that it's empty. When I declare the default value, the 0 comes back. We're still calling that variable in the same way, but we now have this setter function, and every time we make a change to this value, it will update on the page. So let's try our button again. You'll see that, again, we're getting an error. This is because we aren't using the setter function, which comes with a state variable. We can delete our previous variable from here, and then make a small change. If we delete this line, we can then call our setQuantity function. And to call this setQuantity function, we could just put in a value here. We could make it set to 4. And when we press this button, after refreshing, you'll see that when I press minus, it's going to change the value to 4. But this doesn't get any context of what the value was beforehand. Obviously, when we press a minus button, we would expect it to go down by 1. And there is a way to write this setter function in order to do that. So we just delete our 4, we take the previous value, and we run a function on that. And we change that previous value to equal what the previous value was before, but we're going to decrement that value by 1. And that's it, that's our function complete. If we refresh, the default state is 0, and every time I press this button, it's going to change by 1. It's going to decrement. And every time that change happens, this part of the application refreshes and shows that new value. We can then take that function that we just made, and we can repeat it. And we can do this to handle the increment. And this time, instead of decreasing by 1, we're going to increase by 1. Then we can copy our onClick handler and put it within the other button. But this time, instead of calling the handle decrease, we're going to call the handle increase. And we'll change the name of our function to match that because it makes more sense. So now you can see we have a function for decreasing our number and we have a function for increasing it. If I refresh the page, you can now see when I press this button, it goes down by 1, and when I press this one, it increases. And this, from high level, is exactly how you use the useState hook. And we can use this not just for numbers, we can use it for values as well. So let's take our product name, Apple. We can declare another state variable. If we delete our previous variable, this will then replace that. And you can see that Apple is still displaying on the page, but this time we're using our state variable. And we can do a similar thing as how we increase and decrease. So let's say, for example, we had a button that was going to change the value of this product name every time we press it. We'll add this button to our return. And once we've added our button, we can then add another onClick handler. Let's build the function first. The same way we did before, we would declare the function, and this time we'll pass something into the parameter. And this will be the new name, which is supposed to replace the old one. And within there, we're going to call our setter function. And this time, because the context of the previous value doesn't matter, like here, we need to increase the quantity by 1. Here, we don't need to know what the previous name was. So we can simply just say what the new name is going to be. And that's it. That's complete. If we then go down to our button, we can add another onClick, and this will be formatted in a similar way. We'll paste that in, but this time we'll call our new change name function, and we'll pass as a parameter the name that we want to change it to. Let's say Melon. Now, if I refresh the page, you'll see if I press this button, the name is going to update to Melon. Another thing to note when using useState is there's actually 2 ways to declare this default variable. You can either explicitly state it, or we can actually have a function in here. All we have to do is have an arrow function, and within this arrow function, we can have something happen here. This is useful, say for example, if when you first render your application, you need to get a value from a database. You could put that code in here, and instead of calling a function, you can just have it directly within the useState. For the purpose of this demo, I won't call from a database, but I will set the variable name within here. We can declare another variable, we can console log that variable just to show how it's working, and then we can return that variable as the value for the default of this useState. And as you can see, once I made that change, we now see Apple on the page. And that's it. That's all you need to know to be able to use useState within your React applications. And you should now be able to do that confidently. If you would like to learn more about React and hooks, be sure to check out these other videos. Thank you for watching.